Hello aspirants and welcome again to Legacy IAS Academy. In this current affairs lecture, we will be discussing Israel's plan to reoccupy all of Gaza. This is probably in order to end all the skirmishes, all the attacks, etc. once and for all by reoccupying Gaza. So when we are talking about reoccupations, that means Gaza was previously actually occupied by Israel. However, it lost control or it actually withdrew from there in 2005. So we see how and when it was occupied, why Israel lost or withdrew its control and why it wants to do so again. So let's get started with this lecture. So what is the news? The news is that Israel's Security Council has approved the plan to reoccupy all of Gaza once again. However, there are no details that have come out so far about the same. However, one more thing that has been added over here is that this reoccupation plan will not be implemented until the visit of the US President Mr. Donald Trump in the Middle East next week. Now, why is that so? Because the outcome of that visit needs to be uncertain as to what gets discussed, because Middle East has also played a huge role in the battle of Israel and Palestine. We will see what role they have played, as a result of which any implementation or proceeding on this plan is kept on hold until Donald Trump's visit next week to the Middle East. Any action or any implementation is bound to happen only after that, and no details yet, but the plan has been approved to reoccupy the complete Gaza. So let's understand the timeline. As I said, it was occupied previously, but in 2005 there was a withdrawal. So now the statement that is coming, it is a development of nearly 20 years. That means it is for 20 years in the making subsequent to 2005 withdrawal that Israel is again talking about reoccupying Gaza. Now, before we move into the history or historical timeline, one thing we need to understand is the United Nations take on Israel-Palestine issue. So therein, when you talk about Gaza, now Gaza has been considered to be, or whatever the territory in which Palestinians are there is considered to be Israeli occupied territory, given the level of control Israel has on it. So if you can see in this picture also the voting result, wherein you see 124 in favor of accepting that this region is Israel occupied, only 14 against, and 43 is abstention. Abstention means the people or the countries who have not chosen to vote. So a stand of United Nations is that this region is Israel occupied region. However, still Israel continues to still occupy it and not withdraw from it. It did in 2005, but now we are seeing that there is a lot of attacks that are going on. It started with the Hamas's attack in the month of October, of course, subsequent to which, so Hamas attack actually killed some few hundreds of people, subsequent to which Israel army then started attacking, and since then it has killed around over 50,000 people in Palestine. Right, so let's now understand what happened in 1967. How did Israel come to occupy this region and why did it withdraw? So there is a 6-day war of 1967 that we will talk about. So why did that 6-day war even happen? So to understand that, let's go back in history and understand that the roots of this 1967 war was already laid in the 1940s. Now what had happened after the Second World War, when the Jews were persecuted and had to leave their nation, they went on and started settling down in what we call as the present day Israel. Right, so this settlement started because there was mass displacement, mass exodus of the Jews, so they need some place to settle down, and this was their promised land as per their holy scripture of the Jews. The Israel, the present day Israel, or the Jerusalem specifically, is their promised land. So they started settling over there. So when they started settling over there were support that the Israelis got. At the same time, the Palestinians have also had the support. So let's see what happened after it. So the declaration of independence by Israel took place wherein they declared that particular region as Israel. A new country came into existence which did not exist in the early 1940s. So this declaration of independence by Israel, it triggered whom? It triggered certain Arab countries. Which are those countries? Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Syria and Lebanon. That means what? These 5 countries are now going to take side of Palestine against the Israelis. However, you will see that Israelis will be more powerful and defeat these Arab countries combined. However, they will of course have a support. So who is going to support Israel? US is going to support Israel, whereas the Arabs were supported by the Soviet Union. So then, subsequent to this declaration of independence of Israel, there was a war that took place with Israel and the support of United States on one side, and on the other side you have the 5 Arab states plus USSR. However, only one victor will be there, and that will be Israel. Now, what also happened is in 1957, Egypt's ruler Gamal Abdel Nasser, he also decided to nationalize the Suez Canal. Now, what role does this has to play? When you nationalize the Suez Canal, Egypt will have complete control over it. Egyptian government will have complete control over it, and it will not allow any trade by Israel to go through the Suez Canal, which is going to hamper Israel's economy. So, subsequent to this, Israel will respond. And how did Israel respond? Israel responded by invading and occupying the Sinai Peninsula. This entire region Israel invaded and occupied subsequent to the decision of nationalizing the Suez Canal. So it's a huge region which we are talking about, close to Egypt. So it not just invaded but also occupied that. Now, once that was occupied, the United Nations tried to broker peace over there. Right, so since United Nations tried to broker peace, it was again open. The Suez Canal was again open, and Israel then subsequently sort of receded from that occupation because the problem was solved. The Suez Canal was again open for private, let's say, trade, and Israel was again allowed. But subsequent to that, Nasser told the United Nations forces again in 1967 that he is again going to close the Suez Canal. So what has happened? Initially it was open for trade for Israel, then Nasser had closed it, after which the let's say the Israel forces occupied Sinai Peninsula, subsequent to which the United Nations brokered peace and it was open again for Israel. But in 1967, Nasser again told that he will again close the Suez Canal. Now, why is that so? One of the reasons for closing it again was the false story that was told to Egypt that by USSR that Israel was assembling its troops to invade Syria. So USSR, who was supporting the 5 Arab nations, had falsely told Egypt that Israel is targeting or preparing for an attack to invade Syria, as a result of which Nasser again told that he is going to close the Suez Canal again. Now, when the Suez Canal was again closed, various straits were again closed, so that prompted Israel to launch a military strike against Egypt on 5th of June 1967, and this is how the War of 1967 began. Now, this war was of very short duration. In fact, it just lasted for 6 days, and within 6 days, Israel won the war. And it not just won, now winning is there. After winning, it also captured and controlled the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza from Egypt again. So Sinai Peninsula was captured again. However, they had retreated. But in 1967 war, which they won, they again captured the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza region. Right. Now, subsequent to that, the Israelis then continued to occupy the Sinai Peninsula. Now, since they continued to occupy the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza region, what happened is the Gaza region then saw the First Intifada. So what is this Intifada? Intifada is a term which means an armed resistance or an armed rebellion. And this armed resistance was by the people of Gaza, by the citizens or the people of Gaza. It's not a state-sponsored military or anything, but rather it's a rebellion by the people. But what kind of rebellion are we talking about? It's an armed rebellion. So the first Intifada then took place to fight against the Israeli occupation of Gaza. Right? So that continued, the occupation continued, the Intifada continued. Then what? Why did the Israelis leave in 2005? Let us now understand. Now, since the Intifada had started, there will be violent armed resistance by the people. Now, these people did not come out and had a full-blown war. They might be defeated in that. So they started doing certain activities here and there by killing people, by killing certain people through suicide bombing attacks. So the period of suicide bombings and shooting attacks by the Palestinian militant groups started. They also started targeted killing, tank attacks, as well as airstrikes on the Israeli forces. So this was what was started, and even though the first Intifada ended, the second Intifada again started doing this particular targeted attacks, suicide bombings, etc. Now when this was happening, basically a lot of lives were being taken away. At the same time, in 2005, it made Israel leave Gaza because it was a high cost which Israel was paying to occupy that region. Cost in two ways. Number one, the lives were being lost due to suicide attacks, targeted attacks, and airstrikes on Israeli military. At the same time, it was a huge financial or monetary cost for Israel to upkeep their army in that region and keep fighting these supporters of the Intifada. As a result of which, in 2005, Israel decided to unilaterally withdrew from Gaza. So no one asked it to, neither the United Nations or anyone else. It unilaterally decided to withdraw from Gaza. One of the main reasons being it could not sustain the cost of fighting with Hamas and other Palestinian militant organizations, as a result of which it withdrew from the Gaza region. However, 20 years later, it is now planning to reoccupy Gaza. So subsequent to the meet of Donald Trump in Middle East, we'll see what action Israel has to take. Thank you.